Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Yoga Bellies and Babies podcast. I'm Krishna Hasamal, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. Before we dive in, I need to say that I am a prenatal yoga teacher, postnatal yoga teacher, hypnobirthing instructor. I've got a PhD in chemistry. I am not a doctor or a physician. Everything I share in this episode is based on my trainings, my experience teaching women for over 10 years now, and it's evidence-based practices. It's not medical advice. Always check with your healthcare provider before starting or changing any exercise routine during pregnancy. Now, today's episode is a little different because it came directly from one of you. I recently asked my subscribers on my email list, what is the one thing you wish you knew about moving your body safely during pregnancy? And I got this response. The one thing I feel like I need to know way more about is how much or how little we should use our core in pregnancy, and also what does it even mean to use the core? Focusing on transverse abdominals, sure, but pelvic floor, deep low abdominals, etc. I'm continuing to do CrossFit, lowering the intensity for sure, but now at 21 weeks, I notice the belly moves a lot more. So I'm finding it super interesting to see what I can't do, and what movements I should be doing to prepare for birth. That is such a good question. And the confusion is so common, especially among active pregnant women. But this is why this whole topic matters, right? How you move during pregnancy directly affects how your body recovers after birth. I recently had a student tell me she was getting out of the bed in the morning and her belly was making a weird shape. She didn't know what that meant or even if it was okay. That is exactly what we're going to talk about today. Today, you're going to learn what core actually means, how it changes during pregnancy, what those weird belly shapes mean when you're doing exercise or even movements like getting out of bed, what to avoid, how to prepare for birth, and postpartum recovery. Now, let's talk about your core. Let's start with the basics. What exactly is the core? Most people think it's just your abs, your six-pack, right? That's only a small part of it. The core is actually a 360-degree system that works together. Think of it like a cylinder or a canister. You have the front of the core, the abdominal muscles. These are the ones that stretch during pregnancy. You've got the back, which is the back of the muscles that support the spine. You've got core at the top, your breathing muscles called the diaphragm, the bottom, which is your pelvic floor, and the sides, your side of your torso, your waist and around your waist, and the muscles around your waist. Now, all of these together work as one system. It's not just muscles you engage. It's a whole pressure system, right? And when one part isn't working so well, the whole system has to compensate. And during pregnancy, this system is under a lot of change. What exactly changes during the pregnancy? Well, first of all, your belly is growing, obviously, but that growth changes everything about how this system works. It changes the length and the tension of the abdominal muscles. It changes the pressure dynamics inside your core. Your center of gravity changes, your posture changes. How force transfers through your body when you move also changes. And this is what's happening specifically to those abdominal muscles. So you've got two columns of muscle down the front of the belly. You could visualize those as your six-pack. And during pregnancy, these muscles need to stretch and separate away from the middle to make room for your growing baby. You might have heard about this separation. It's called diastasis recti, and it's completely normal and necessary. You can't prevent it, right? Your abs, these part of the abs need to separate to make space. But what you can do is manage the pressure so the separation doesn't get worse than it needs to be. And the connective tissue between these muscles also softens during pregnancy because of a hormone called relaxin, which is produced during pregnancy. And this is good because it means it's allowing your body to adapt. But it also means that this area is more vulnerable to excessive pressure. Your pelvic floor at the bottom of what we refer to as the core is also under more pressure because of the weight of the baby, the weight of added fluids, and all of that pressing down. And at around 21 weeks, like the pregnant mama who asked this question, you're at the point where these changes actually become more noticeable. Your belly becomes bigger. The pressure is different. So movements that felt fine at maybe 12, 16 weeks might not feel so good anymore. And that's completely normal. So let me tell you now about the student who asked that question as she was getting out of bed. She's saying that when she gets out of bed, she's seeing these weird shapes in her belly. So I asked her, how do you get out of bed? She lifts herself straight up using her abdominal muscles, kind of like doing a sit-up. And what she explained was this weird shape was more like a dome or like a cone sticking up in the middle of her belly. So she asked me at class, is this normal? Is this okay? And it's normal for anyone in pregnancy to get worried about anything that looks strange. So this is called doming or coning, and it's an important signal from your body, right? So what's happening is that when you create too much pressure in your core, like when you do a sit-up or you lift yourself straight up from lying down, your abdominal muscles can't manage that pressure because they've been stretched and separated, so the pressure has to go somewhere else. And it will push out through the weakest point, which is that middle line where the frontal abs have separated. It literally bulges up like a dome or like a cone. And this is your body saying, this movement creates too much pressure for me to handle right now. So why is this important? In that moment, you're putting stress on the already softened connected tissue that's between your abs. But in the long term, if you keep doing these movements that create this doming or coning throughout your pregnancy, it might make the separation wider, and that might make your postpartum recovery harder and longer. And of course, we don't want that, because once your baby is born, your body has to bring those muscles back together and heal that connective tissue. And if you spend 40 weeks making that gap wider, it's going to take longer to close. Okay. So now you're thinking, right, what am I supposed to do instead? Always, always, always roll onto your side to get up from lying down. Roll onto your side. Use your arms to push yourself up to sitting and then stand up. Never do a straight kind of sit-up crunch motion during pregnancy. This also applies in postpartum. So this one simple change will protect your core during pregnancy, and it sets you up for a better postpartum recovery. That's why in prenatal yoga, I'm constantly reminding everyone to roll onto your side, whether you're going down or whether you're getting up. It's not just a nice suggestion. It's the way to practice safely for now and for later. Okay, now let's talk about the confusion around sentences like engaging your core during pregnancy. You've probably heard all sorts of advice, everything from don't use your abs at all during pregnancy to keep your core strong and keep doing planks, to suck your belly in, pull your belly button towards your spine, pull your baby towards your spine, engage your transverse abdominis. And no wonder you're confused, right? So what do you need to do? You do need your core to work during pregnancy. You don't want it to be weak. You're carrying the extra weight. You need that stability. But you also don't want to create too much pressure, because that's what causes that doming, and it puts strain on the pelvic floor, and it makes recovery after birth much harder. So your core needs to be responsive, not rigid and not completely switched off. So your core should create the right amount of tension when you need it. So this is, for example, when you're lifting your toddler, when you're carrying groceries, when you're doing a yoga pose. It should also be able to release and expand when you need it. So when you're doing deep breathing, this is part of making space for your baby to grow and to move. When you're resting, the problem I find with the advice to constantly engage your core or pull your belly button towards your spine all day long, or a 60-minute yoga class, is this, right? Imagine you have a balloon that's filled with water and you're pressing it down, right, from all sides. Where is that pressure going to go? It's going to go down and out. So down to your pelvic floor and out, pushing that separation. And this is the opposite of what you want during pregnancy. Your core doesn't need to be constantly engaged. It needs to respond appropriately to what you're asking your body to do. So how do you know if a movement is creating too much pressure? Your body will tell you. You just need to know what signals to look for. So here's some signs that tell you that you need to modify. that doming or coning, right? That I talked about earlier, that weird shape that's coming down the center of your belly during a movement. If you see this, that movement means it's creating too much pressure. Please modify it or skip it. Any pressure or heaviness in your pelvic floor. The other thing is if you feel pressure or heaviness in your pelvic floor, if that feeling of something pushing downwards, like when a tampon is in but it's not quite right, or a heaviness in between your legs. Leaking, even if it's just a little bit of pee, not even incontinence, sorry, but more like leaking. Even if it's just a little bit of pee during exercise, coughing, sneezing, laughing, this is your pelvic floor saying, I can't really handle that pressure. Pain in the pubic bone area, in the lower back, in the hips. Pain is always a sign to stop or to modify. Breath holding. So a lot of traditional yoga practices require us to hold our breath. Now, if you have to hold your breath through a breathing practice, or if you need to hold your breath to get through a movement or through an exercise, that means it's too intense. You should always be able to breathe smoothly throughout, whether it's a breathing practice or a physical practice. The other thing is feeling like it's really hard to stay stable, whether it's a yoga pose, like a balance. If you're really struggling to hold on and stand up straight, that means it's too much. Modify it or avoid it. So these are not signs to stop moving. They're just signs to modify how you're moving, to change that movement. As pregnancy progresses, you might notice these things even more, and that is completely normal. It doesn't mean you're getting weaker. It just means your body is changing and you need to adapt with how you move. How you move is how you move physically and even how you do your breaths. So, what movements often create too much pressure, which is the thing that we wanted to avoid? Here are the most common ones. So, the traditional crunches or sit-ups. For example, getting out of bed by lifting up. There's a lot of pressure in the middle line and it causes that doming. Planks that are held for a long period of time. Plank is okay, but short plank might be fine if you don't see that doming. But long holds will create more pressure and that core might not be able to manage it well. So lifting anything heavy over your head sends the pressure downwards towards your pelvic floor. Any high impact jumping, burpees, box jump, even in yoga when we jump to come into standing positions, the pelvic floor has to absorb all of that impact. And already during pregnancy is already under extra pressure, so we don't need to add any more pressure on top of that. So how do you actually modify these positions? You want to maintain your workout, you want to stay active. So this is how you would modify it. Those crunches, those typical sit-ups, replace them with, do it standing. You could do side bends or gentle twists while standing. Always remember to roll onto your side, to go down into the floor, and to come up. Planks, you could do it on your knees, or you could do it against the wall, and you could do it for shorter periods of time. Overhead lifting, keep doing the weights, but just lower the weight, right? And focus on breathing out as you lift. Or maybe switch exercises to something that doesn't require that overhead movement. How to replace jumping movements? Replace it by stepping out, stepping in, or low impact alternatives. So you can still get that heart rate up without sending that pressure down into that pelvic floor. For example, in yoga, maybe you're used to doing boat pose, Navasana, with the legs up. You can modify this and bend your knees or use your hands down. Or skip it entirely if you see any of that doming or coning shape. Maybe you've been used to doing a strong chaturanga practice or vinyasas. Do it with your knees down, do it on a chair, or do, cat instead. Maybe you missed those deep back bends or you were doing full wheel. Do a bridge pose, but you could put a block underneath your sacrums. Or you can skip back bends. You can do things on your knees and you can do things on the chairs. So any pose where you see any doming, back off the intensity and choose a different variation. Now, let's talk about what you should be doing, because this is just as important as what to avoid doing. What people don't really realize is how moving during pregnancy directly affects how your body recovers in postpartum. You spend months creating pressure in your core, getting out of bed the wrong way. You're doing these movements that cause doming, coning. You're making that abdominal separation wider, weaker. Recovery is going to become harder and longer, right? But if you spend those 40-ish weeks moving in ways that manage the pressure well, breathing properly, practicing the right movements, you're setting yourself up for a smoother and faster recovery. So what can you focus on? First, the breath. Always go back to the breath. Exhale fully when you do the effort. Breathe out as you lift, breathe out as you push, breathe out as you come up from a squat. That is your natural core activation, right? You don't need to always be thinking about engaging anything. The breath already does it for you. Number 2, pelvic floor. But not what you think. So most people think pelvic floor work means Kegels, squeeze, release, squeeze, or squeeze, hold, release, squeeze, hold, release, squeeze, hold, release. But during birth, you need the pelvic floor to be open and stretchy, not always squeezing tight and strong. So yes, you do need to know how to engage your pelvic floor, but you also need to know how to release it and allow it to open and lengthen. So you could practice things like supported squats. You could do child's pose with your knees away. You can do cat movements on your hands and knees, focusing on that exhalation. Happy baby pose if you can lie back, and if you can't lie on the floor, there's other variations. And all of these and others help you release that tension on the pelvic floor, which is what you need for birth. Then we have functional movements. Right? You probably heard squats are important during pregnancy. You might want to go into labor in a squat position. So start practicing them now. You might not want to do a full squat, but you can do a supported squat sitting on blocks. Lunges, hip circles, all of these help build strength and mobility. Then we also want to think of positions that create space in the pelvis to help baby move around and grow. Wide leg squats, things like goddess pose, pigeon pose, warrior poses. All of these positions, these standing positions, help create mobility and space in the pelvis, which obviously is helpful for birth, and it makes you feel stronger and more confident, which is a bonus. And then always go back to your basics, right? Roll onto your side to get up and down from lying down, slowly with awareness. Keep breathing through every single moment, and watch out for those red flags we talked about. Now, a lot of my students are into CrossFit and boxing and running during pregnancy, and then they always ask, can I keep doing this? Yeah, keep doing them, but lower the intensity. Yeah, I know it's hard to lower the intensity, but you're doing this, which is already great. So just do it, but at a slower pace. And prioritize the feeling of how it feels in your body over how much you're actually lifting, or how many reps you're doing, or how high you're getting your heart rate up, or how fast you're going. That is no longer the priority during pregnancy. And my favorite, use the talk test. Can you hold a conversation while you're exercising? If you get too breathless to talk, that means you're working too hard. Again, I'm talking about pregnancy. So when you see those warning signs, modify. And just remember, you're training for birth and postpartum recovery. This is not a competition. You're not a professional athlete. You're an athlete in the sense that you're preparing your body for the biggest physical event of your life, and for the months of the recovery that are going to follow afterwards. Now, here's something really important, in my opinion. You cannot see yourself, right? When you're in a plank, your focus is in another direction. You can't see your own belly when you're doing your plank. You could, but it would take the awareness away from the plank. You can't always see what shape your belly is doing. You can't do the assessment. And that's exactly why at Chris Yoga Studio we have live online yoga classes. We have recordings, but we always have multiple live yoga classes a week, because this is what happens when you're in a live yoga class. I can see you through your camera. I can tell you in real time when you have to modify and what you have to modify. I can catch things before they become problems. And we're in constant communication. So you can ask questions and get answers immediately. And I can tell you from my experience that this changes week to week, right? So maybe one week something worked for you and the next week it doesn't. And having a professional and experienced teacher's eyes on you during pregnancy is not just a nice to have. It's essential for practicing safely. Because you might think you're doing something wrong when you're actually doing it perfectly, or vice versa, right? You need feedback. We all need feedback. All of us. You need to be seen, and you deserve to be seen, especially when you're moving your body through pregnancy. So let me come back to the original question. How much should we use our core during pregnancy? And the magical answer is your core should respond appropriately to what you're asking it to do. What does that mean? Not too much pressure that causes leaking, doming, or pain. Not switched off so that you're not using or not having any stability, just right for the task that you're doing at that moment. So the way that you move now, today, this week, throughout your pregnancy, that directly affects how your body is going to recover after birth. And remember that every time you take that effort to roll onto your side to get up instead of coming upwards, every time you modify a movement, every time you practice releasing your pelvic floor, all of that is helping you prepare for birth and prepare for an easier postpartum recovery. And if you want to learn exactly how to practice safely during pregnancy, I'm hosting a free live workshop. It's called Prenatal Yoga Upgrade, the 5 shifts for a safe and strong yoga practice. And it's happening on April 13th, 6:30 p.m. Central European time, right here, Amsterdam time. It's completely free. I'm going to teach you 5 simple shifts so that you can practice with full confidence, build strength for the birth and for after, and feel amazing and confident in this body that's constantly changing. So register your spot now. The link is right here in your show notes. And please send in more questions like this. What is that one thing you wish you knew about moving your body safely during pregnancy? What are you confused about? What do you wish someone had told you earlier? DM me on Instagram, send me an email to hello@chrisyoga.com. I want to answer what you're actually wondering about, not what I think you should know. So thank you so much for listening today. And if this was helpful, please share it with another pregnant mama who's trying to figure out how to stay active safely. Until next time, take care of yourself. You and your baby deserve it.